Hey guys, something different this time around, but don't worry, I'm going to go back to my usual content afterwards. Though I wanted to take a bit of a detour. Now, instead of ranking stadiums like everyone's favorite residential Mr. Clean, I decided to do something different and take a look at stadiums that I've actually been to. Now, I've decided to split everything up by league as well as level because there's a variety of major league, minor league, and even college level stadiums that I've stepped inside of, whether it was for a game or a tour. So with all that being said, here is my personal stadium experience.
Starting with MLB, we've obviously got Wrigley Field. I first went to a game in April 1998 against the Cardinals. My uncle took me in spite of him being a lifelong White Sox fan himself, in addition to the majority of my mom's side of the family being Sox fans themselves. But hey, my dad and his side of my family are all Cubs fans, so it made sense. I don't remember too much of it, though I would still go to a Cubs game every year from 1998 to 2009 with my uncle, my dad, or even my mom. Memories include going to a night game in 2006 with my childhood friend Ross, where we watched the Phillies crush Rich Hill and talked about how much we hated the Cubs not having last names on their home jerseys at this time. And then from 2007 to 2009, I went with various classmates as someone's grandparents had season tickets and gave them to people at my school. No, not for free. You had to pay for one of those tickets if you so desired. These games were always in April, and we all froze to death, with 2009 being on the first Jackie Robinson Day, where everyone on every team around the league wore the number 42. Before 2009, wearing 42 on Jackie Robinson Day was optional unless you were Mariano Rivera. After that, it wouldn't be until August 2019 where I took my wife on a date to a Cubs game where they beat the Brewers and later found ways to gag away a playoff berth that year. Ugh. If you do ever decide to go to Wrigley to catch a Cubs game and or your team is in town playing them, explore Wrigleyville and its bars, though be warned, there's still some sketchy stuff on the yuppie north side. Always be sure to keep that in mind. A big negative of Wrigley is that unless you have bleacher seats, you can't walk through that area underneath. But overall, I highly recommend you check the stadium out. Now we head over to the stadium that I've gone to the most, especially with my loving uncle and grandfather, and later my brother would tag along after he was born. And not just because it's a million times more affordable than Wrigley. Seriously, me and my wife were at about $140 for just the tickets at Wrigley. Anyways, I can't remember the exact first time I went to Commissariat Field, though the last time I went was in 2018 when the Yankees just spanked them. Ugh, the Giancarlo Stanton grand slam. But on the upside, I did get to attend Mark Burley's perfect game against Tampa Bay, and yes, it was amazing seeing that Dwayne Wise catch too. But other than that, this stadium gets crapped on since it opened a year before Camden Yards did, which set the trend of retro classic ballparks. Maybe it's because I'm so used to it, but I never minded this stadium. And even then, they still have the pinwheel scoreboard that old Comiskey Park had, the showers in the stadium like the old place, and a better picnic area than old Comiskey Park. If you don't expect too much from a stadium experience, this will satisfy you. But if you expect to be pampered, well, there's other stadiums in America and Canada that will satisfy those needs. One big major issue this stadium has: if your seats are in the 500 level upper deck, you can't leave it. I'm serious, you can't explore the stadium if you have upper deck seats. Why? I don't know. I've found a multitude of answers, and obviously the team isn't going to state the reason. Supposedly, it's to not encourage people with 500 level tickets to take lower seats, which is about as stupid as it sounds. So at Guaranteed Rate Field, avoid the 500 level. Besides that, not bad. Back when it was known as Miller Park, this was the first stadium I ever went to that was located outside of Illinois, and blew my mind that baseball could be played indoors? Sure, football could be played indoors, but wouldn't a baseball hit the roof considering how high up the ball could pop up? Well, in Tampa at least. This was 2004. I was 9 years old, and the Brewers were up against the Astros back when both teams competed in the NL Central with the roof closed since a storm was rolling in. The Brewers got demolished 13-7 on, I believe it was the April 9th game. After the game concluded, my uncle and I stayed longer to watch the roof open, and it was magical. logical. And not gonna lie, but a large part of me wanted to go down Bernie Brewer's slide and was let down when I learned it wasn't open to the general public. To think today, only the AL Central is devoid of a retractable or even fixed roof stadium in MLB after the Twins decided to move out of the Metrodome after the 2009 season. But overall, I'd certainly love to go back to Wrigley North. Seriously, it's amazing how much Cubs fans generally outnumber Brewers fans when the two teams play each other in Milwaukee. Back in late summer 2006, me, my uncle, and my grandpa piled into a rental base model Cobalt and drove all the way to Kansas City to watch the defending champion White Sox play a 3-game series against the basement-dwelling Royals. A Royals team before the likes of Alex Gordon, Salvador Perez, Eric Hosmer, or Lorenzo Cain. The only real players they had worth mentioning at the time that I can recall were Zach Greinke and Mike Sweeney. But of course, Kauffman is a part of the Truman Sports Complex shared with Arrowhead Stadium, which I didn't get to go to, unfortunately. Of course, this was before the major renovations that Kauffman overtook in 2010, so outfield seating was immensely sparse and only existed in the very corners of the outfield. The rest of where there would be seating, well, you had the Royals' immaculate fountains. But with the lack of outfield seating like it has now, as a kid, it felt like a minor league stadium, as most minor league fields have no outfield seats. The Sox took the first 2 games and lost the 3rd game, which was also rained out, unfortunately. Oh, how fun it was to walk back to our hotel that night. Overall, this stadium was okay at the time, but I feel like I need to revisit it since there's been so many changes since then. And yeah, I'd like to go to Arrowhead at some point too. When we were on our way back home from Kansas City, we decided to stop in St. Louis and catch a Cardinals game at the then brand spanking new Busch Stadium. They were playing the Phillies that night, and my god, if you told me this team would win the World Series that year, I would have thought you were full of crap. The Cardinals lost 8-1 that night after losing 16-8 the previous night. We sat behind home plate in the upper deck and it was alright, though we left early with the idea to beat the rush out of the stadium, but man were we wrong. The train station back to our hotel was packed. And not gonna lie, but I kind of wish this stadium featured some high walls like old Busch Stadium. Am I the only one who thought it looked too similar to Guaranteed Rate? Yeah, I'm sure I just pissed some Cardinal fans off. Sorry, but this is the plainest retro style ballpark compared to all of the other retro ballparks we've had before and since, and yet so many people drool all over it. Probably because of Cardinal bias. Not much else to say other than I wouldn't mind revisiting this stadium someday. These next 3 stadiums were all attended in the spring of 2008 with my uncle and grandpa, and was my first time going on a plane, let alone my first trip to Florida. It was also back when spring training hats were awesome. These were the best, no questions asked. We flew out of Midway via Southwest long before the 5,000 some cancellations as of recent. We wanted to also see the Red Sox, but they were playing in Tokyo at that time. We also wanted to see the Dodgers, as this was the very last year of Dodger Town before they moved to Arizona, but getting tickets for one of those games was impossible. Anyways, here's the 3 Grapefruit League stadiums I was actually able to attend. The spring training home of the Twins, located in Fort Myers, and the regular home of the FCL Twins, formerly the GCL Twins, and the Fort Myers Mighty Muscles. Yeah, try saying that name 5 times fast. I think they were playing the Phillies that day. It was a fun time, and I'd like to revisit this someday, despite not being a Twins fan myself. Ah yes, the last year of the Indians having their spring training in Winter Haven, Florida, before moving to Arizona the very next year. The Tribe actually moved into the stadium in 1993, both after the Red Sox moved to Fort Myers and after their original spring training facility was unfortunately destroyed by Hurricane Andrew. Now, the reason I'm dwelling on those details for so long is because this stadium experience was awful. The Indians were playing the Yankees that day, and Jeter was playing. The only time I personally attended a game Jeter played in. I don't care if it was spring training, I still saw Jeter. No aroids, though. Our seats weren't behind the plate or even in foul territory, like most seats at a spring training stadium. No, they were outfield bleachers. So where's the problem? Well, they didn't go over the outfield wall like they do at every other stadium with outfield seating. No, they were at ground level. Being a short kid at the time meant that I could barely look over the wall, so that was fun. There were also no aisles in this Park District set of bleachers, so good luck if you had to get up to go to the bathroom or grab a bite to eat. The stadium is now part of the Chain National Lakes Complex and is currently used for amateur leagues of various age groups if this website and pictures are anything to go by. So I guess I could revisit this place, just not like how I could back in 2008. But frankly, it would be better than the last time I was there anyways. The last spring training facility I went to. This has been the Pirates Spring Training Stadium since 1969 and the regular home of the Bradenton Marauders in Bradenton, Florida, and I saw them playing the new Miguel Cabrera and Dontrell Willis-led Tigers team. It was a fun time and the food there was delicious. The stadium, from what I remember, felt a little bare minimum because it's so stinking old, but still fun regardless. I might want to revisit this stadium someday. For better or for worse, I've only been to Soldier Field after the controversial renovations in the early 2000s. My first game was in 2003 when the Bears beat the Redskins thanks to a late-game field goal from Paul Ettinger. In 2004, when Peyton Manning and the Colts just spanked the Bears. A preseason game against the San Diego Chargers in 2006, which was fun. And finally in 2007, where Iowa utterly dominated Northern Illinois on the same day Michigan fans would love to forget. I'd say I had plenty of fun at these games. It's just unfortunate that I never got to experience the pre-renovated and higher capacity Soldier Field. At about 61,000 seats, yeah, no, it's time for the Bears to get something new, which is why I fully support the potential Arlington Heights Stadium. Hopefully if Ryan Poles does manage to turn the Bears into the next greatest thing this offseason, fingers crossed, I just might revisit this stadium soon. Picture this, it's Columbus Day weekend. You just finished your 7th grade sectionals race for cross country, and now you're off to Green Bay to watch your team play deep in enemy territory with your white Urlacher jersey that you totally still have today. You also watched the highs of Illinois beating Wisconsin in your hotel room, and watched the lows of the Diamondbacks completing a sweep of the Cubs in the NLDS. It was 2007 and the Bears and Packers were playing on Sunday Night Football, and little did we know at the time, but this would be Brett Favre's last Packer home game against the Bears. But before the game started, we attended a tailgate party at Lambeau, and I had a burger there. But man, that burger did not sit right with me. We were surrounded by jerk-ass Packer fans, all the while I'm feeling woozy as if my burger is going to come back up. Metal bleachers are okay for the college level, though I question them in NFL stadiums, especially if it's below freezing out. I remember it was as if all of the Green Bay players coated their hands in butter because all they did was fumble the ball, which allowed former worst ESPN color guy Brian Greasy to lead the Bears to victory. And when we got back to our hotel, I finally threw up in the toilet. Hooray for food poisoning! Frankly, I wish I threw up on the jerk that was sitting behind us. Obviously, Lambeau has gone through many different upgrades afterwards, so this might be something to revisit for me, but I'm sure not going up there alone. I went here a couple times, both were in 2004. First time I went, the Bulls were playing the Mavericks, which they lost. The next game, I saw them lose to the Kobe and Shaq-led Lakers, but I can at least say I saw a game that Kobe and or Shaq played in. Awesome sauce. Now, I give my full thoughts, but we're not done yet. I also went here a couple times for Hawks games too, but it was also in the dark times where Bill Wirtz didn't allow home games to be televised because he thought it would be unfair to season ticket holders. Stupidest thing in the world. First time was in, I believe, 2003 or 2004. My dad took me and they were playing the Kings, which of course they lost. Second time was with my dad and it was a preseason game, but I honestly can't remember who they played. I remember it ended in a tie though. Overall, I need both time and money on my hands to catch a game at the UC again. Just always make sure to be careful over on the west side. Located right next to Chicagoland Speedway is the drag strip and dirt oval that is Route 66 Raceway, which is also ran and operated by NASCAR. I haven't gone to the drag strip, but I have gone to demolition derbies at the dirt oval twice. Both were fun times. It is loud, but that's what you expect at an event like that. If you're into something like that and you also live in the Joliet area, how could you pass up an event like this? The first college football stadium I ever went to also became my alma mater. I can't remember the first Northern Illinois game I went to, but I remember one of the earliest was against Temple, and Garrett Wolf and Michael Turner were their guys in the backfield. Of course, while I was a student at NIU, I went to plenty more games with friends and family, as well as gathering with other first years on the field at the beginning of my first year at Northern. It's a good place to catch a game, and unlike some other MAC football schools, we don't have to deal with a running track going around the field and thus pushing the stands farther back. What kind of sucks though is that both halves of the stands aren't connected, so if you enter on the student side but want to go to the other side, you can't. There is currently a large renovation project to renovate many of NIU's athletic athletic facilities, which includes adding south end zone seating to bring capacity up to 42,000 and create a horseshoe-shaped seating arrangement. Overall, it's definitely a pretty nice small college stadium. The only stadium I've toured, this was another spot we visited during our Kansas City trip, as KU isn't too far away from the Missouri-Kansas border. I got to be on the field, and man was it cool being there. I don't care if Kansas isn't a football school and 2007 was a fluke season for them, it's just magical being on a football field, especially when you're 11 like I was at the time. If I were to do another Kansas City trip, this stadium would definitely be on my places to go list. The first and only time I went here was in October 2009, where the Illini were 2 seasons removed from being ranked, beating number 1 ranked Ohio State in Columbus, and followed by getting demolished in the Rose Bowl by You Suck at Cheating. Juice Williams was in his senior year and was taking on Michigan State that Saturday. Illinois lost that game 24-14. It showed the unfortunate horror that 2007's craziness also gave us plenty of flukes. Illinois showed once again why it was considered primarily a basketball school, but thankfully their football program has been on the upswing lately, which means I gotta get my butt back to Champaign soon. Northern Illinois was playing Wisconsin in 2007. This was back when Camp Randall was the state of Wisconsin's largest stadium before Lambeau added more seats. Our seats were up in the nosebleeds, maybe a row or two away from the absolute top of Camp Randall. It was a fun party, as college football tends to be, especially as the Huskies were absolutely demolished by the Badgers that day, unfortunately. But the most memorable part of this was getting a poster at the gate, specifically a poster of Badgers cornerback Jack I. Don't know who that is? Don't worry, he was only in the NFL for 2 seasons and is currently serving a 9.5-year prison sentence. So yeah, definitely would love to revisit this. More so a game where the Illini play and probably beat Wisconsin. Being a student at NIU also meant going to other school sports, including basketball. Let me make this clear. NIU is not a basketball school, though the court is pretty cool looking. The games I went to were fun despite hardly anyone being there. Frankly, my graduation ceremony here was better attended. But overall, there's more college basketball arenas I'd like to go to before revisiting this guy. The only Division III stadium I've been to, I caught a UW Whitewater game due in part to me, my dad, and brother visiting my sister at college as she was a student there at the time. They were playing UW Oshkosh, and if you know WEAC or just D3 college football in general, then you know Whitewater is a force to be reckoned with. Sure, the stadium is simplistic, but it has beautiful sight lines even in the rainy weather we had to endure that day. Overall, it'd be fun to go back someday. This won't be the last time you see Allstate Arena mentioned, but my dad took me and my siblings here back in 2015 when DePaul called this home before moving to Wintrust Arena in 2017. This was on January 18th, 2015 against St. John's, and I remember the date because it was the same day the Packers choked the NFC Championship game away against the Seahawks. It was a tight game, and sure, DePaul hasn't been lighting the world on fire, but it was still fun to see the Blue Demons take down the Red Storm. Originally the home of the Schaumburg Flyers before they ran into horrendous ownership and financial issues in addition to the Northern League's downfall, Wintrust Field has been the home of the Schaumburg Boomers for over a decade now. No, not the boomer you're thinking of. This is a male prairie chicken. I've been going to games here for over 2 decades now, ever since the Flyers days, whether it was with Cub Scouts or family. It was always a fun time that I always managed to return to, and fun fact, the field itself is intentionally a clone of Wrigley, from foul territory being asymmetrical to the overall dimensions. Originally the home of the Joliet Jackhammers before the demise of the Northern League and some financial issues, new ownership changed the team name to the Joliet Slammers as a reference to Joliet Prison. Remember the beginning of Blues Brothers when Elwood picks up Jake from Joliet? Yeah, that. I've been here and had fun at many Jackhammers and Slammers games many times since the team's inception in 2002, despite how scary downtown Joliet is. Now, not only does the stadium host the Slammers, but also St. Francis's baseball team and the 3A, 4A, IHSA high school tournaments. That's pretty cool. I went here once, but it was fun. Being the host of the Kane County Cougars, I went while they were an athletics affiliate, and with how many teams they were affiliates of before joining the American Association of of professional baseball. There's just too many team names and too many legendary players to name off of that played for this team. I highly suggest you look at the list on their Wikipedia page. We were in the left field deck, and I honestly cannot remember the circumstances of us going, but I don't care, because it was a fun game. The food was delicious, and now I know I have to revisit this stadium because it now has a higher seating capacity than it did when I was younger. I think there used to be a hot tub in one of the outfield decks, but I couldn't find it on any of the recent stadium maps, so I guess they removed it. Gotta get my butt back to Geneva and catch me a Cougars game. This is another stadium I went to once in my youth, and they weren't even the Windy City Thunderbolts yet. No, this was the year 2000, and they were the Cook County Cheetahs. Ultimately, because I don't remember much about the game other than I had this awesome pennant that I couldn't find for the life of me, this is a stadium I'd like to revisit someday. Except this time, it's more than likely going to feel like it's my first time being there. Here we've arrived at Allstate Arena again, except it's for the AHL Chicago Wolves and the Arena Football League's Chicago Rush. I'll get the Rush out of the way since it was one game, but it was a 2007 playoff game where the Rush beat the Los Angeles Avengers before going on to lose to the San Jose Bearcats in the conference championship game. And man, was that game not only a blast, but it genuinely felt like a party. Meanwhile, I went to Wolves games seemingly almost every year of the 2000s to the mid-2010s, even in the later years of the Wolves IHL days before they moved to the AHL. These games were always fun, and even though the Allstate Arena has been around since the late 80s, it still holds up to time. You're going to an AHL game, not a luxury hotel. Also, need to shout out to the Wolves for being an AHL team whose uniforms aren't just a carbon copy of their NHL affiliate. I cannot tell you how much I'm not into that. Definitely gotta catch a Wolves game as soon as possible. Last one, and it's a hockey arena in Florida? Okay, this was during that 2008 Florida trip from earlier, and between all the spring training games, we caught a game here. Home of the Florida Everblades, get it? They were playing the Gwinnett Gladiators. As fun as the game was, I'll never forget the blown lead that night. But hey, next time I'm in the area, I'll catch a game, especially since they're now the defending Kelly Cup champions.
So that's all the stadiums that I've been to over the course of my life, and obviously I want to go to more. Frankly, if money wasn't an issue in my life, I would tour all of North America and go to every single stadium possible. But because we don't live in that world, can't do that. Maybe someday there will be other stadiums I hit up. Anyways, go ahead and leave a comment as always. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you all later.